Welcome to My View from the Piano Bench. We do this every Wednesday evening here on my Joe Holt's Notes YouTube channel, in addition to Piano for My Friends every Thursday evening. Thank you very much to those of you who support and encourage me through the links available on the support page of my website, and you'll find a link to that page in the video description. If you haven't looked at it before, thank you for considering. Any drop in a tip jar is much appreciated. And if you look at the Patreon, it's kind of a unique take on that, particularly for those of you who watch routinely this and or the other weekly video. So I have a topic each week that I go into, try to be interesting and across the board to musicians and non-musicians. And today will be kind of an extension, didn't plan to do it initially, but it kind of just jumped out at me, of not full-time, but all the time, of I think a couple of weeks ago. Getting a little more specific about now the experiences that the musician has to have or could potentially find, but the unique landscape, not real favorable actually to us, but one that we live in because we love what we do, and we wouldn't want to do anything else. The title: Get a Job. Oh my goodness. Well, the crux of the conversation that I mentioned that triggered not full-time all the time was kind of this, although it wasn't framed as, something mean or demanding, more of curiosity. But it was the curiosity of like, okay, convince me. I'm not convinced. Why are we put in that position anyway? But that happens all the time, or it happens a lot. And sometimes, it's under the surface and never gets brought up, right? And our life is just strange or unusual or a curiosity. But, not everyone is so kind about it, actually. nice old tune, Mean to Me. Why must you be mean to me? Well, this really isn't, though, about mean or intolerant people, although they exist. This is more about the many people that are not predisposed to look at a job and see musician as fitting. You know, no matter how much we're busy working, doing our thing, it's just not a template that people have. And really, that's understandable on different levels. It would be, of course, less annoying if people kept it to themselves. Did I say that? Oh, yes, I did. But it is understandable, especially if you're one to define a job as someplace, you know, you go with your lunch pail singing, right? That's a job, but don't I have, oh, let's keep going. In terms of actually performing music, though, if you're talking about actual employment where you work for somebody and get a regular paycheck with a W-2 at the end of the year, and that's what a lot of people, you know, confine it to. They'll make exceptions for it, but it's more like, well, who's your employer? And what's your benefit package like? And yeah, now they'll make exceptions for like a doctor who has their own practice. What am I doing? I'm a musician who has my own practice. Okay, doctors make more money. So is this about a job? Is it about money? Is this about making a contribution? No, it can't be about that because we're just looking at the money or the employment. Oh, well, anyhow, in terms of having that kind of opportunity, there's not really a lot. So let me ask you, what full-time salaried opportunities can you think of or are you aware of for a musician? And I just realized something. By playing that, I'm going to get my video copyright flagged, which is something that's okay. I'm probably using the wrong terminology. When you have copyrighted music and you play it and the kind of automated AI system, you know, recognizes it, then you know, your video is put in a different category, not eligible for monetization, and you know, and then they have ad revenue. You might see ads on the video, and if you do see ads on the video, it's not because I put them there. It's because it goes to the copyright owner. And I believe it was Merv Griffin who wrote that. See, I was going to finish it because it goes to E flat. To see, and then I go, wait a minute, copyright, too late. Doesn't matter, you know. It's just like I just look each time I upload a video and say, okay, what's my status for this one, right? Oh, there's another crazy thing about being a musician. So what was I talking about? Oh yeah, what kind of opportunities can you think of? Please frame your answer in the form of a question. All right, so the answer is, or the question is, what is whatever? Okay, the main thing in my realm as a musician that comes up all the time, and it came up when I was in high school. You know, all serious musicians are aware of this, and many try to do it, and that is the military. To try to get into one of the military bands. It's highly competitive just by the nature of how competitive it is. And they hold you to real strict requirements. There's strict audition requirements. you know, and the strict requirements and the nature of the competition, particularly so many people who want to get in, uh, kind of create the cream of the crop situation. Uh, and So if I'm going to play just a little something as I try to insert tunes where they're appropriate, whenever I would have the idea or the theme of the military and you have to play music, you play all the service themes so you don't leave somebody out. But I'm only going to play one just because, and my dad was not, a musician by any stretch. But he spent his career as an enlisted man in the Marine Corps. And that's my experience with the military, not one of music. Not really how it's supposed to be played, but anyway, uh, the yeah, the competition is pretty fierce, and you start seeing notices like in high school, or if you're in college or whatever, bulletin boards or on social media, and positions opening, trombone for the jazz ambassadors or something. There's all different kinds of musicians. And music. There's country music and rock music and jazz and classical and choral and all of us musicians, us now, defining us that way, know people. I was never predisposed to do it, but a lot of people I know auditioned, and I don't know that anybody that I knew who auditioned actually made it in. I know a ton of musicians on the other side who've retired after their 20 years, because that's the thing. You do your 20 years, you come out, you're like 40 years old maybe, and you have a bit of a military pension. Okay? And then you're out gigging and you supplement your pension, and you're doing okay. But yeah. And I forget what I was going to say about that. I was going someplace, but oh well. Yeah. So I'll just stop there. There's going to be something about yeah, because I was never inclined to do it, and I think it has to do a little bit with an experience I had when I was about 10. Of course, when you're a military brat, you're a child in a military family, which I was, you're moving all the time. And by the time I was 7, we had moved to the 6th place I lived, which was southern New Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. The reason we moved there is because my dad was given the, position of supply chief for the Marine Corps supply activity in Philadelphia. And he chose not to live in the city, but to live, in the suburbs across the river. And, I was the only child, so he gave consideration to, okay, we're going to rent a house on the street where you can walk to school on one corner, walk to Sunday school and church in the other corner. And I'm like, 10 minutes from South Philly and all that. I meaning my dad, right? And the good thing about that is that they kept him there for 9 years. before he eventually retired on disability. And that doesn't happen in the military. That suggests to me, which is no surprise to me at all, that my dad was like crackerjack at his job. And the one time he took me over there that I remember, actually it was a couple of times, but the one time I remember being inside the building, and I don't know why, but it was actually during a work day. You could tell that my, dad had some status there based on how like the younger guys would respond to him. And I remember there was this one, young Sarge guy or whatever, kind of looking at my dad out of the corner of his eye, waiting for him to leave the room, which he eventually did, left me there by myself. He walked over to me, put his arm around me and said, "Whatever you do, son, don't enlist." And he walked away. So I guess you could say I took his advice, right? And not only did I not enlist, I did not audition. But great opportunity for musicians, right? But like that's a unique thing. How many things are like that? Well, how about a major orchestra? Yeah, and those guys can, they make decent money, salaries and benefits, and but talk about not full time all the time. The life you lead as far as being immersed in the music and practicing and being ready to perform. But you talk about hard to get in. Easier to get in the military bands, I think, than an orchestra. Really small amount of opportunities. And of course, the orchestra world is contracting. There are lots of, smaller orchestras that you freelance for. You do contract work like I do. And those major orchestras, man, they are really hard to get into. And I'm sure this happens with the military bands too, but I am aware of musicians who take their education path to give them the best shot at landing an orchestra gig. And I've told this story before. I hope you don't mind me repeating it if you've heard it. That back when I was in my early 20s, I was doing a lot of piano teaching in people's houses, which was an easy way to initially acquire students, and then an easy way to get referrals and such. And I got kind of networked in. So my top crackerjack student was a young girl, and I think she stopped taking lessons maybe as an early teenager or middle teenager, but she would always be like the cleanup hitter and the recitals I would put on and everything. And then of course after a time you lose touch. So about 20 years later, or maybe a little less, but some significant time later, right? I'm having a conversation with this woman's mother, and she's all embarrassed, and she said, "I have to tell you something. I don't want to tell you, and I think you're going to be upset, and I'm so sorry." And she goes on to tell me that this student, why can't I say her name? Tina went to college for music and put the piano aside and took up the bassoon. And it was entirely pragmatic. It was she felt that would be her best shot to land an orchestra gig. And so she concentrated on bassoon. Of course, you're not going to land an orchestra gig with piano, so she went for an orchestral instrument, and she purposely chose bassoon because not too many people play it. Of course, how many opportunities are there for bassoonists as well? So I don't know if the supply and demand thing is really different when you have something that really the only application is the orchestra gig. If you're playing trumpet, you could play in a Blood, Sweat, and Tears revival band or something, right? Probably not with bassoon. But anyhow, the point of that is that she made this pragmatic decision, and the mother thought I was going to really be insulted. I'm like, wait a minute, hold it, stop. I'm thrilled, I'm elated, I'm delighted. You kidding me? Because I explained, and the mother never knew this, that when I'm involved in teaching, what I want to do is get that fire lit of enthusiasm and drive that ideally is lit before I show up, and that's why somebody would seek me out. In the case of a parent and giving a child lessons is a little different, but you get the fire lit and you take that person to the point where that artistic flame just self-perpetuates. That their relationship with music becomes that they're not going to live their life without it. Doesn't mean they're going to make a career out of it, but I mean, it's now a part of them. That's the goal, right? And it's like, who cares what instrument they play? An instrument is like a delivery system for music. So she chose another delivery system. I scratch my head, like I wouldn't do that for myself, but that doesn't matter. And I was so proud of Tina. It's like, yeah, right? But she did that, and it did not pan out. In the great majority of time, it doesn't, as far as at least a major orchestra goes. And I believe Tina's a school teacher. Yeah, I think she at least started as a music teacher. Oh, and that's a little bit of a transition now, because like that's the one place that you kind of meet in the middle between a full-time job that has to do with being a music performer and being a music performer. That doesn't make sense. Let me read what I wrote, because I jumped ahead of myself. So almost everything is, so everything makes you kind of fall into a category that most people don't see as legit, because 99% of the music business, the performance business, is contract work. You won't believe how small I write. People say that's why I get mixed up. Anyway, and those who, do it, me, whoever, as a musician, get used to it. You accept it. That's what it is. And are there times when I absolutely don't like it? Yeah. But are there times that I'm grateful that I'm not an employee and I'm not in that kind of relationship and dependent on, if I have a decent boss or what the whims are, how micromanaging they're going to be? Am I glad I'm not in that position? You bet I am. Oh my goodness, that's not for me. But of course, that's the choices we make. And those who, get it or accept it do, and those who don't. And it's a funny juxtaposition that people will say to me, I wish I could do what you do. I envy you, and and man, if I could make my living playing music. And I'm sometimes just stare at them, but then other times I'll just say, usually I don't though, but I'm capable of it. I've done it. No, you wouldn't like this. Don't kid yourself. You have to be a special kind of crazy. But now, the place that meets in the middle of all that is a school teacher, a music teacher, so specifically a school teacher. Now, okay, the reason I'm saying it meets in the middle, now I'm remembering what I wrote, is that it's not really performance, but it kind of is. When you're involved in teaching, that's sort of like the other side of the coin of performing. And the two go hand in hand. And it's always understood that every performing musician should keep their hand, no matter how busy they are, should keep their hand in teaching. Because that's part of the process. One, passing it along is kind of a responsibility. Two, being able to pass it along throws it back at you. And I don't know if this is going to make sense or not, but our best teachers are ourselves. And I find myself all the time you know, recalling something that I've said to students for 30 years, because, you know, it's like, this is it, right? But I never really took it for myself and really like listened to it as if I was being taught it. Because what I'm passing along is really primarily where I've arrived, not parroting information that I was given. Although that can happen too. It's like, wait, I need to listen to myself. I was right about that. You know, so it's really something that we all should be doing, and it's still in the process of music making. I have one friend who considers that he's just as much a musician or in the music business or making a living as a musician. If he's performing or he's teaching, he gets the same gratification out of both. And listening to him tell me that is like, yeah. Now, for me, they're very different experiences. And, you know, I used to do a lot of teaching, and, you know, I was always encouraged to do it because it's a part of who I am, especially the encouragement, the coaching, the helping empower people to own things. But it's a different space, obviously, in performing. And, you know, I don't do as much these days, a little more now than I've done before, but it's still, but that the little bit that I'm doing, I'm reminded of like how motivating it is to me. And, you know, I put as much energy into it as I do into the playing, which basically is, you could say, more than is necessary. You know, it's like, if I'm in, I'm all in. But I do get the idea that almost counts, really, as a full-time performing job. And it just goes back to the not full-time all the time thing, that the life you lead, if you're going to do this, you're all in. not take all of me, because that's what we do. Uh, Now, talking about school music teachers. No, wait a minute. Yeah, that's right. Talking about school music teachers, the primo gig for that would be a college professor, right? Because now you're in that system with, your status is your professorship, and the fact that you're a musician, you get to move into that. But of course, you're talking about, hard to get. There are positions, not a lot. And of course, now we're talking about, serious education. But most, by far, most music lecturers, can't say professors or teachers in college, are adjunct faculty. And they're brought in for specific things, and they're contract work, basically. And you may do a lot, you may do a little. And, my relationship with Washington College in Chestertown is adjunct. I don't have a doctorate degree, and there are so many musicians with master's degrees. They're going to look for doctorate degrees if they're going to have somebody actually professorizing there. And of course, it's really, really competitive. But I mean, great if you get it. You're doing good then. What if you're a college professor and you're in a major orchestra? Oh my goodness, I don't even know if that could be pulled off. But you're doing okay then, aren't you? Right? But a much more accessible route, easier to attain, is a school band director. Although in this day and age, it's precarious. But for the last 20 years, it's been save the arts in schools, save the arts in schools. The schools are cutting. But then it gets brought back. It's like it's not going away. It's precarious, but it's not done yet. And I just have a Facebook friend Facebook friends basically meaning someone you just about don't know, but occasionally you see what's going on in their lives. And this person apparently didn't have the job she had before as a school band director, and because now it's like, oh, I'm hired again, and I'm over this school, and I'm so happy, and this is going to be great. So it's like, okay, there's a school still hiring, a middle school still hiring a band director, and they absolutely exist. And I know a lot of people who've gone this route, like I do with the military, but for the school band director thing, I know people, before they did it and after they did it. It's more like in my circle of performers. And several I know have recently retired. So it kind of tells you where my age is, right? Recently, like in the last year, right? And it's like the military thing, right? You had your pension, now you can go out and do gigs, and and because at this stage of life, you also can have your Social Security, and there's a big difference between basically performing as a contractor, which means you're self-employed, which means you have to do your own taxes and pay your own Social Security, blah, 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 right? And health insurance, and, gigging to supplement an income. Sort of like the weekend warrior thing, which I'm not talking about at all, and weekend warrior is kind of a pejorative term. I don't necessarily mean it that way. And it's not always meant that way. But the person who just has a day gig and they play music kind of sort of for fun on the weekend, that's not what we're talking about. It's a person like me who gigging is primary income. It's a different world than, hey, I got some, money to pad my vacation fund, or the college fund for my kids, or my second car thing, because I'm gigging and I'm living off my other thing. That's not how it works. Now, as far as school band directors, there's not many movies that I get attached to. I find movies hard to watch. It's just my thing. But there are some movies that I've really been drawn to, and Mr. Holland's Opus is one. And Richard Dreyfuss, I think. And if you don't know the movie, it's a portrayal, fictional portrayal, but really like accurate in the best sort of heartwarming sense of a musician who gets a music ed degree in college as a fallback. Now, I think I've talked about my relationship to school, which is you go there to learn. And when I first went to college as a music major, I was music ed because that's kind of what you do. Because unless you know you're going to be a performance major, which is kind of like a basket weaving degree, yeah, except at the real high level, it kind of sets you up for performance opportunities. If you really see yourself as really, cutting the mustard in that department, particularly in a classical sense, right? But most go in for the education degree because that sort of justifies it. Oh, it's the fallback. If you can't make it as a musician, you can teach. And that's socially acceptable, by the way. That's like the one thing that everybody understands. I mean, the orchestra thing is great, and the military thing is great, but that's not really in everybody's sort of view in their everyday lives, normal people. But school teacher, yeah, music teacher, yeah, Mr. Holland, go. And he had no plan of having a career as a school music teacher, Mr. Holland now, but figured that if he needed to fall back for a few years, if things were lean, he would do it. And so he got his degree, and he needed to get a teaching gig, and it was going to be temporary. And then he just fell in love with it, and he was the person. And I had a high school band director like this, who was just enriched everybody's lives, and then that thing about making music where you put it out and it comes back to you, right? Which I would say happens from the stage, right? Also happens in the classroom when you're invested like that. I'm looking at the clock as I'm trying to decide if there's a story I want to tell, and I think I'm going to skip it. But let me just continue here then. So Mr. Holland got to live his not full-time but all the time existence, and he would be writing charts at home and working on things and being really invested in the students. And there was a little interesting subplot with that, if you've seen the movie, totally believable, right? Because of that. And yeah, there are many, 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 many good band directors. There are also some that aren't, but and they dedicate themselves to that extent. Now, if you watch the movie, and I found this interesting, one of the scenes with a young clarinetist who, like a squeaking ack kind of thing, right? But her little feature was the Acker Bilk tune from the 60s, Stranger on the Shore. And of course, when she's immersed in it and they're showing, all of a sudden it becomes this beautiful orchestral thing, and I find it interesting, that a trad jazz Dixieland, you were allowed to say it then, clarinet player, had his little one-hit wonder thing on the charts. Remember this tune? When I said a minute ago, I'm not going to tell that story. What I really meant was, when I have little stories I tell, then I couple a tune with it. And I said, no, I've told that story before, and I played that tune so many times. So I'm not going to play the tune. I'll just tell the story real quick, in case you didn't hear it. And this is like a Mr. Holland story. When I was a freshman in high school, trumpet was my double because I had to play an orchestral instrument to be in the band program. But piano was my instrument, and the thing that I was doing at the time when I got into high school, I wasn't exposed to jazz so much. I was improvising. It didn't, wasn't focused in a jazz sense, but I was reading ragtime music in my piano lesson. Right? And so the high school band director wanted to have a freshman ragtime ensemble do something to feature the freshmen. The reason it was because I already played it, right? And I was the most advanced musician of the group, right? And so he wrote the entertainer out and he arranged it. Very time consuming, especially then. I would still do it this way, but most musicians now use like software and print it. He hand wrote the whole thing. But what he decided to do was make it easier on the less experienced musicians by having me do the key transposition, short version, that different instruments have different ranges and have different centers of gravity in terms of where their range is, and you would write for them in a different key, right? So if I'm playing like in no sharps, no flats, the what's his name? Trumpeter clarinet player is playing in 2 sharps, and the alto sax player is playing in 4 sharps, I think, or 3. What do I know? Yeah, 3. But you could see that like some keys are easier, some keys are harder. And a less experienced musician, you want to put an easier key. So he rewrote the entertainer, every note of the whole piano score, all the sections, in the key of B flat, which is kind of a nightmare. He gave it to me and says, okay, this is yours. You have to be kidding me. Says, no. And he made me do it. And the other sort of motive was, okay, this is going to challenge you and you need to do this. This is a skill set you need. So, I mean, he set me up because I'm sure Scott Joplin had no intention of not playing the entertainer in C, because I don't know if you can see my hands because that with the camera. So everything is just moving around the white keys. And when you do the black key, you just come back. But if you do it in B flat, now you have this random arrangement of black keys. I had to relearn the whole freaking thing for that. But it allowed it to happen. He was invested in all the musicians involved, me and the others, working for our good. And, he left an imprint on all of us. Paul Mayberry, what a guy, what a gem. Mr. Holland, yeah. So anyway, if we move past that, we're going to do like a straddle the line thing, but we're going to probably fall off the line as to what people would consider a job, right? But if you talk about like an orchestra or the military band, how about a full-time touring band, right? You're probably a contract worker at that point, though. Back in the day, you could have been an employee when like the big bands were working. And my friend Cody Level, young sax player, got out of college and had his eye on the military band, like most people do, and who have that inclination. And that wasn't happening for him. Doesn't mean he's not a really good player. It's just really super competitive. And he sent an audition tape to the Glenn Miller band, and he got accepted. And at the time, that was the last remaining full-time ghost band. I don't know if it's full-time anymore. I kind of think it isn't. Uh, but he was on the road for however many years. Yeah, he was on the road with them, uh, singing tunes like this. Yeah, singing too. Just realized I think I kind of imposed a straighten up and fly right ending. I just happened to the choo-choo. I'm getting my drinks mixed here. Uh, but yeah. Uh, so you move from that, and now we're not really talking about what anybody would consider a job, but how we make it work as musicians freelancing. And if you can have something that I would term an anchor gig, something that is a pretty large part, and it's precarious when you have, a good percentage of your eggs in one basket. When you have all your eggs in one basket, you're an employee. And oh man, I had a lesson of that years ago when we lived in a townhouse community in Elkton, and my next door neighbor was a union painter in Philadelphia, and he was laid off at one point, and it was eye opening for me because all of a sudden he was no longer employed, and I don't know what his circumstance was collecting unemployment, but I guess even if you do, which that doesn't apply to me, but even if you do, you probably don't get enough money to pay your bills, and it got pretty dicey for them. Yeah, to the point where we were running we ran an extension cord over to their house. One of the three-pronged things, so they could have electricity because theirs was cut off for a while. And I'm thinking, wow, my life is always just about like the ebb and flow of more or less. It's never all or nothing. There's never nothing, and that's it's an interesting thing to manage. Because it's like a lot of times, like the surface level is here, and you feel like, or you are like perpetually like here, but you're not on the ocean floor, And most people, it's like here or here, and from someone like me saying like that, and that's the only life I've ever known. The dribble income in starting with paper routes when I was 10, 11 years old, which I continued to keep even up until I started teaching piano lessons and doing gigs, but I never had to like work at McDonald's, but it was always this idea for me. It's normal, the gig mentality, but when like, wow, it's either like all there or not there at all, and that's an all or nothing at all would have been a good tune to play had I thought of it. But the anchor gig, if you 20, 30, 40, maybe 50% of your income comes from one place, 50 is getting really precarious. But that allows you to like know where, you have something to build on. And an anchor gig for me would have been the food court gig in the Cherry Hill Mall that was like 6 days a week for a while, which you've heard me talk about back in the 80s when the Cherry Hill Mall in New Jersey was the first to build a large indoor food court, 1,000-seater. And I was, kind of in-house. I was teaching for the store that sold the mall the piano. And so I was the one sent there to, do the gig, which became a steady thing. And I was the picnic pianist, and that was an anchor gig. A church musician can be an anchor gig. If that's what you do. Back in the day, of course, organist, and now it's more like worship leader. And I guess in a big mega church thing, it can be full time. Actually, no, of course it can be full time. There are full time musicians who work for churches, but a lot of small churches or smaller churches have part time things. And there were 2 positions that I held for a number of years each. And one, I was actually salaried because it was halftime. So I was salaried and I got a W-2. Strange when I get a W-2. And the other was, my typical, contract work, 1099 thing. And now this made me think of something. Oh yeah, I remember back in New Jersey, the Silver Lake Inn. It was a nice restaurant, and there's a piano player that worked there for years, and I got to know him a little bit. And he was talking like, "Yeah, I'm the only like gigging musician I know who's salaried and gets 2 weeks vacation a year." So they had the guy on salary, and he was just there for years and years and years. He played like every night or 6 nights a week or whatever, And even when I was like working down the Showboat, and that was more precarious. That was contract work. So even when you're playing full time, it's seldom that you're an employee. But that Showboat work, that was a good anchor gig, and I'm playing things like this. Yeah. Oh, I miss this Showboat. That's crazy. All right. And finally, a little side trip with this that came to mind when I wrote this. Music therapy is a bit of a bait and switch to some younger people who come into it, because you'll be a musician, but you're drawn to the idea of music therapy, but you're also drawn to the idea that you can have a regular job, because there are positions, right? And it's like the school teacher thing. It's like, okay, that's a real job. I'm going to be a music therapist. Woo! But then you find out that the positions that are available, there's really not a ton of money in it. And you can do it, you can make a living and stuff, but you're going to do better off as a school teacher. But that's not the path you took. And I hear this a bunch. In fact, when people find out that I do have a music therapy certification, that sparks conversations. Oh, I do that and this and right. But not too long ago, older couple said, "Oh, our daughter's a music therapist." And then they described how she realized that this wasn't going to work. And so she decided to just build her own practice. In other words, she accepted the contract work thing. But I think fewer people would go into music therapy if before it was like too late to go back, kind of, if they knew what they were going to be dealing with. And for me, having a music therapy certification was, to put it kind of crassly, a way to get more gigs. You know, a different angle to like put more things on my plate. And that's how I can say for like 10 years, depending on how you calculate them, you could calculate them in one way to say I was doing like 600 gigs a year, right? Because every day I was facility hopping, and then at night, or like many days during the day, and then at night I do my regular gigs, you know. And whenever I was doing something like that, or like I say, I had a halftime service position, you know, I really didn't slow down my other gigging. Even when I was doing the showboat, because things were slow then. So getting the 6-day a week, you know, gig where I commuted 2 hours each way from Elkton, Maryland to Atlantic City was a godsend. But I was still like juggling other things with it, you know. And yeah, it's the life we lead. So the question about get a job. You gotta get a job? Never goes away. Not for me, though. I know what my job is. So, there you go, a window into something. And thanks for being here. Thanks so much. Thanks for your engagement, whatever that engagement may be, including just being there. And even if I never will know you're there, I know you're there. So, thank you so much. Hope to see you again.